Panama has maintained a century-long grip on the specific maritime routes linking the vast Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Control over this geographic choke point gives the incumbent nation, and its allies like the U.S., immense pricing power and strategic leverage over global supply chains. For decades, this position went completely unchallenged. Excavating a trench across a continent requires tens of billions of dollars, creating a physical and financial barrier to entry so high that it blocked all competitors. Then, in the 2010s, an exogenous shock hit the market. China backed a proposal to construct a massive, heavily subsidized rival canal through Nicaragua. That Nicaragua canal was eventually abandoned. The earth was never fully excavated. Yet the mere proposal of its existence triggered a massive, permanent reduction in global shipping costs. Even as the physical infrastructure in Nicaragua stalled out and vanished, the average cost to move a standard shipping container between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans continued to drop. In international trade, geopolitical rivalry functions as a quantifiable variable that directly alters microeconomic market structures. Strategic entry deterrence dictates that when a monopoly controls a profitable territory, it defends that position by making the environment for a potential competitor mathematically impossible. A credible threat from a well-funded rival forces the incumbent to expand its own physical capacity far beyond current market demand. Because of this defensive overinvestment, market prices permanently drop, regardless of whether the rival infrastructure is ever actually built. To defend their spheres of influence, competing global powers inadvertently subsidize international trade for everyday consumers. To understand how this works, we can look at an economic model developed by researchers at the National Bureau of Economic Research. The scenario begins with an unchallenged incumbent holding total control over a market. This chart maps the incumbent's profit curve. To maximize profits, the incumbent intentionally restricts throughput to a precise limit, a variable known as monopoly capacity, or K sub M. By holding physical supply rigidly at this limit, the incumbent artificially inflates the cost of transoceanic shipping. In the real world, this theoretical limit was enforced by the strict physical dimensions of the pre-2016 Panama Canal locks. The narrow concrete chambers capped vessel size at what is known as the Panamax standard. Normally, a potential entrant, like Nicaragua, is completely locked out of this market. This math changes when a rising global power, represented here as G sub 2 or China, enters the equation. They offer a massive geopolitical subsidy to the entrant, a variable we'll call S sub 2, which covers the multi-billion-dollar cost of excavating an entirely new transoceanic canal. Once S sub 2 crosses a specific financial threshold, the entrant's projected long-term profit margin is suddenly pushed out of the red and into positive territory. A rising power's willingness to absorb extreme financial losses takes a previously impossible route and transforms it into a mathematically viable threat. With the rival subsidy active, the incumbent faces a choice: accommodate the entry or deter it. Under option A, accommodation, the incumbent allows the rival to build. The market splits into a duopoly. Prices drop moderately. Under option B, deterrence, the incumbent aggressively expands its own capacity, flooding the market and crashing prices. This new massive volume threshold is K sub D, or deterrence capacity. It represents the output required to push shipping rates so low that the entrant becomes unprofitable. Mathematically, K sub D must increase in direct proportion to the size of the rival's backing.
The larger the threat, the wider the incumbent must expand to maintain deterrence. This theoretical expansion maps perfectly to reality. In 2016, Panama completed a $5 billion project carving out a third lane of massive new locks. These new Panamax locks physically embody the deterrence capacity strategy, allowing significantly wider and deeper ships to pass, doubling total cargo throughput. Panama's $5 billion expansion was a tactical flood, designed to saturate the future market and bankrupt Nicaragua's business case before it began. Building deterrence capacity carries an extreme financial burden. It requires the incumbent to voluntarily sacrifice its own short-term, monopoly-level profits to defend its market share. This is where the incumbent's ally steps in. The established power, the United States, provides a defensive subsidy, S sub 1, to fund this immense overcapacity. They value their geopolitical monopoly enough to consistently pay this subsidy, resulting in a sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium. The incumbent successfully matches the geopolitical commitment of the rising challenger, dollar for dollar. Because the incumbent commits to this massive K sub D expansion, transoceanic shipping rates fall so low that Nicaragua's expected profits permanently drop below zero. Panama successfully constructs the expansion. The Nicaragua Canal is suspended. Rival entry is entirely blocked. This ghost canal was defeated not by engineering failures in the Nicaraguan jungle, but by a mathematically precise geopolitical subsidy race won by the incumbent. The primary beneficiaries of this massive geopolitical deterrence strategy are not the global powers themselves. They are global shippers, retailers, and end consumers. Counterintuitively, the mathematical proof shows that successful deterrence actually benefits consumers more than actual physical competition. This chart compares total market volume. The capacity required to deter a heavily subsidized rival is strictly larger than the combined capacity of an accommodated duopoly. Because of this extreme overcapacity, a metric known as generalized chain costs, which measures expenses across the entire supply chain, plummets. This lowered cost structure allows massive economies of scale, enabling shipping lines to utilize gigantic post-Panamax vessels that carry significantly more cargo per transit. Geopolitical tension inadvertently gifted global trade with maximum infrastructure scale, generating vast consumer surplus without the rival ever pouring a single drop of concrete. However, there is an inherent vulnerability in this game theory model. It relies on the assumption that physical capacity remains static once built. The Panama lock system relies on millions of gallons of gravity-fed fresh water per transit, sourced from inland reservoirs to lift vessels over the continental divide. Now, a new exogenous shock is degrading the physical reality of the deterrence capacity. Severe droughts have gripped the region, dropping water levels in the critical Gatun Lake. This environmental constraint has shrunk the canal's hydrological capacity, forcing authorities to limit daily transits far below the maximum potential of the expanded locks. When physical throughput shrinks, K sub D shrinks with it. This drives up routing costs and reopens the mathematical window for future challengers to enter the market. Shipping lines are now forced to dynamically reevaluate their generalized chain costs, shifting volumes away from Panama and toward the Suez Canal or North American land bridge routes. Ultimately, global trade infrastructure is a fragile equilibrium, balanced perfectly on game theory, geopolitics, and strict environmental limits.